Hello and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've got a fun interactive slider card for you today using that Sizzix tropicool slider die set. I will start out with a piece of my Cougar 110 pound cardstock and my Gina K sea glass ink and a blender brush, and I will blend that blue ink all over that panel to kind of mimic a sky. And then I've got my dies here. I'm using those first two and I will tape them together and die cut that from that blue cardstock that I ink blended on. And then it creates that little flap that'll be the slider later. And then I will remove that centerpiece and then die cut that outer one again from that same Cougar cardstock. And then I've got the pull tab here, and I will die cut that one from the white cardstock, and then my little toucan and all of the little assembly pieces for him as well, and all of the leaves. And I die cut the leaves several times, I just didn't show all of them in the video to save time. And this card is all die cutting, there's no stamping in here, so that's kind of fun. So when I finished with that, I'm using a variation of green shades, and I've got a black and an orange alcohol markers here. I've got some purple tape that I am folding the ends over on themselves and then adhering that onto my craft mat. And I've got that little toucan do it sentiment, and I will use my Spectrum Illustrator marker. It's the true black color, and I will color that first piece with that. I thought this would be easier than die cutting all of these images from different colors of cardstock when I had white just right there on hand. So then I will be doing my toucan first. So I'm laying out all the pieces for him on that purple tape, and I'll use that black to color the toucan and that wing, and then the tip of the beak, which is still in that little tray on the left hand side. And then for the orange, I'm using a Copic marker. It's the YR16, and I will use that for the larger part of the beak. So I go ahead and I will remove all of those toucan pieces and set those aside. And then I will place down a few of the leaves onto that purple tape, and then use the green markers to color those in. This very first marker is a Spectrum Illustrator, the CG3 marker. And this next one is JG2, it's a Spectrum Noir. And then another Spectrum Illustrator, AG3. And then this last one is JG6. It's another Spectrum Noir marker. And then I've got a piece of some white glitter cardstock, and I will put that down on my purple tape as well. And I will use a few shades of this green to do a blend on there to get a little bit of variation in the greens. So I went back and just blended in between a few of the colors to try to get a better blend. And then I didn't like how bright that green was right there, so I colored over it with my AG3 marker. And then I thought that wasn't quite dark enough, so I was going to go in with a darker one, but then decided to try the sentiment over it and see how I liked it. And I actually did, so I kept it like it was. And when I finished with that, I bring my toucan in, and I zoomed in a little bit so you can see better as I adhere all of these pieces since it's so small. I've got some Distress Collage Medium in the matte finish, and I will assemble the little toucan. So I've got this white piece that has his little eye on it. And I get that all lined up. Sorry, I went off screen there for a second. And then I will add the little orange beak. And then I will add that little black tip of his beak to the very end. When I get all that placed where I want it, I add some Scotch 3M foam tape to the wing to pop that up so that it would be easier to distinguish among everything else that's on him. And here you can see him, and I think he looks so cute. So when I have finished with that, I've got my glitter cardstock piece here, and I will use a pen to trace around that little sentiment label that I die cut. Then I've got some scissors, and I will cut on the inside of that pen mark so that I wouldn't have any green cardstock hanging on the outside of that die cut piece. I add some 1/8 inch score tape to the top and the bottom of that sentiment on the back side. And then I will remove that release paper and then adhere that down onto that green glitter cardstock. Here you can see that sparkle. So then I will assemble my slider mechanism. So there's a little score line here, and you want to take that and fold it upwards towards the top of that little slider piece. So I went ahead and set that down, and then I grabbed my Teflon bone folder, and then I will come in and crease that so it's nice and flat. And when I finished with that, I grab my Tonic guillotine paper trimmer and that scrap of cardstock from one of those die cut pieces and cut between an 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch piece of cardstock. It doesn't really matter the width. I will add some 1/8 inch score tape to the bottom of that flap that I folded over on that slider mechanism. And I will turn that over and adhere that to the back of that little flap on that front die cut piece. And then reinforce those score lines on that. So here you can see how that slides. And as you can see, it slides, or it can bend upwards, which I didn't like, so I added some 1/8 inch score tape to the bottom of that tab. And that's where that little cardstock strip comes in. I place that down, and then I will trim off the excess so there's just a little bit on either side, and that will prevent it from popping up as you slide it. So when I finished with that, I grab the backer piece and I place it on the back of that blue inked die cut panel. I use some purple tape to hold it down, and I pull that slider mechanism up. I use a pencil and I trace around the bottom edge of that so that I know where to place all of my, or some of the leaf die cuts, and here you can see that pencil mark. So then I will take a few of these leaves and I will add some adhesive dot runner by AdTech on the back of those and place them on the bottom side of that panel where that pencil mark is. So then I trimmed off the excess of that one hanging over on the bottom, and I've got this Staedtler eraser. I love this one, it erases really well. And I removed that pencil line that I created so that you wouldn't be able to see it when you pull the slider up. I've got some 1/4 inch score tape here that I will put on the back of that slider mechanism piece to create kind of a track for that cardstock to slide in so that it doesn't move, and it'll also adhere it to that panel that I just added those leaves on to. So I will line those up and then adhere that down onto it. And now you can see how that looks when you slide it up. You can see all those fun leaves in there. So then I've got my little Toucan Do It sentiment here. And I add 2 strips of 1/4 inch score tape to the back of it. I used score tape for the majority of this so that everything would be adhered really well onto this card. So then I place that on top of those leaves, and then that kind of is a fun little surprise when you pick it up. There's that little die cut sentiment. I probably should have stamped them though. It made it a little bit thicker and was harder for the mechanism to slide down easily. I got caught on that sentiment a little bit. So then I used that AdTech dot runner adhesive on the back of the rest of those leaves to place them kind of like in a cluster on the bottom of that bendable slider piece. And I add some foam tape to the back of my toucan, and I will place him on top of those leaves in the center. So here you can see when it pops up, those leaves and that toucan come up with it. So then I added some of those extra leaves hanging around underneath of that die cut slider mechanism panel onto the card base. I just thought it would be fun to add a little bit more into it. I added some foam tape to the back of that panel so that when you grab the slider tab it was easy to get a hold of. And then I will adhere that down onto that card base. And then I've got some little clear water droplets here by Dress My Craft. And I will use some Distress Collage Medium in the matte finish and my wax pencil to place a few of those down. And then that finishes the card for today. This one was so much fun to create. I don't often do all die cutting and no stamping cards, so this was a fun change for me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you again soon. Bye.